Srila Prabhupada managed to build more than 100 temples around the world, from America to England, from France and Switzerland to Australia.
He is clearly an immensely important figure in the story of global Hinduism.
Srila Prabhupada, as a septuagenarian, managed to create this huge network around the world that exists even today.
Srila Prabhupada is a remarkable example, a remarkable testimony.
Just because the sun is shining over Britain, it doesn't become an English sun. Sun is sun for everyone. In the same way, God is God for everyone. The dedication that Srila Prabhupada showed and the harmony between what he believed and what he practiced, these are some of the things which were so inspiring.
I think Sing, Dance, Pray is a great title for this book. It reflects so much of the joy of worship. It was a great story. It's the great telling of the life of a great man. And I've really enjoyed reading it and found it incredibly helpful and inspirational to me.
He was so strongly inspired by this idea that we should make everyone happy and united in this world, because otherwise there are too many divisive forces in this world.
I invite all the dignitaries to kindly take your seats for today's book launch and discussion. As our dignitaries settle down, allow me to please introduce each of these eminent speakers to you today. First, we have His Grace Sri Chanchalapati Dasa, the Senior Vice President of ISKCON Bangalore and Vice Chairman of the Akshaya Patra Foundation. Sri Chanchalapati Dasa, in 1984, became a full-time dedicated member of ISKCON Bangalore. He came across Srila Prabhupada's teachings while he was studying at the Indian Institute of Science, and as you can see, the teachings of Srila Prabhupada have radically transformed his life. Next, we have with us Professor Andrew Davies, Professor of Public Religion, Director, Edward Cadbury Center. Professor Andrew Davies is a biblical scholar and literary critic who works on the reception and impact of the Bible, particularly in the context of its influence on society, its handling by Pentecostals and evangelicals globally, and its interpretation in music and the arts. Recently, he led the UK government's pilot project for the professional development of religious leaders from 2019 to 20, and continues to work with various departments of the UK government to promote the understanding of religion in policy-related contexts. A very befitting profile and context to have this discussion. Thank you so much for joining us today, Professor. And of course, finally, we have the author of the book himself, Dr. Hindol Sengupta ji. He's a multiple award-winning author of 10 books. He has been a Chevening Scholar at Oxford, a Knight Begert Fellow at Columbia University, and has a doctorate in international relations from the Geneva School of Diplomacy. He has been a World Economic Forum Young Global Leader, and the Chief Economic Research Officer at Invest India, the National Investment Promotion Agency of the Government of India. We're so delighted that this morning has brought us all together. I would like to now invite Dr. Hindol Sengupta ji to kindly address our audience today.
Namaste, Hare Krishna. It's so lovely to be back in your lovely town again. I've had the opportunity to come to Birmingham before with other books of mine, all thanks to my dear friends Minesh Patelji and Dr. Gautam Sen. And I'm really particularly pleased to bring this book to your lovely town, because this book was really special. I actually pondered for a long time and were working on other projects to see which would be my 10th book. But as divine intervention and grace would have it, this book suddenly sort of, this project came about, and it had just happened. As the video said, it is indeed true that while ISKCON, the International Society of Krishna Consciousness, for Krishna Consciousness, is well known in many parts of the Western world, in America, in England, Srila Prabhupada, its founder, is relatively, even today, not very well known. And, this book I hoped would be a corrective to that. However, one is always a bit wary that one doesn't want to write a hagiography, right? Because that I don't think serves any purpose. So how does one balance and put context to such an incredible, character and a figure, and put them in real historical context? I was saying we had a release at Oxford yesterday, and I was saying there that to me, Srila Prabhupada is not just a great devotional figure, which of course he is. He's a great spiritual leader, but he's also a great historical figure. For the simple reason, and let me begin from there, if you look at Srila Prabhupada's life, look at the historical interlinks or interfaces in his life. He saw Gandhiji, ask people to boycott British goods in the independence movement. He was so influenced by Mahatma Gandhi that he actually did not take his graduation certificate from Scottish Church. And many of you who might know Calcutta would know that's a very big deal. Scottish Church was one of the most influential and most elite educational institutions of Calcutta at that time, perhaps in the whole of India. His contemporary at that institution was Subhash Chandra Bose. So he was highly influenced in his early years by the national movement, by the freedom movement of India. He saw the bombing, the Japanese bombing of Calcutta. He saw India's transition into independent India. He saw, of course, Gandhi, and then, of course, Jawaharlal Nehru and others. He corresponded or wrote letters to many of these figures, explaining his vision for India. And after that, as his life went on, he finally landed up in America in the middle of the anti-Vietnam War protests. So he saw this incredible moment in American history where, there was this great movement against the Vietnam War. There were protests on the streets of America. And by the time his life ended, he actually had seen everything from the Indian freedom struggle to the flower power generation. He had interacted with the Beatles. George Harrison had become his disciple. It was an incredible life in many ways, right? And Srila Prabhupada, in that sense, had many interfaces with a lot of very influential events, characters, and historical moments, around the world. The other very interesting thing about Srila Prabhupada, of course, is Srila Prabhupada only, and a lot of people don't even remember this, Srila Prabhupada only went to America at the age of 69. So he was already at an age where most people wind down their life. He actually began in many, and when you read the insider books of ISKCON about Srila Prabhupada, many of them written very beautifully by many monks, you will notice that a lot of focus, of course, is on Srila Prabhupada. But that's just the last decade of his life. There is a whole life that he led before that, right? And in that decade, between the age of 70 and roughly 80, Srila Prabhupada managed to build more than 100 temples around the world, from America to England, from France and Switzerland to Australia. It's an incredible feat. It's an incredible feat. And in order to do so, as many of you would appreciate here, it required not only enormous devotion, but also enormous institution building skills. Because he had to raise that capital, deploy that capital, have all these young devotees. Many of them also we must not forget how difficult it was for him. Srila Prabhupada arrived with only a few rupees in his pocket in a cargo ship after he had gone through 2 heart attacks in America. His first disciples in New York were hippies. They were 20-somethings who actually were rejecting the Vietnam War and, American capitalism, so to speak. And many of them were experimenting with drugs, including LSD and so on and so forth. These are the young men and women that Srila Prabhupada picked up, so to speak, and created a Krishna consciousness movement around the world using them. It's almost unbelievable. If you think of somebody much younger today going to the West and trying to do this, it's not possible. So there's a great story on how he managed to do this. And to these young men and women, he governed and, was a guru to them in every aspect of their life. And to the external world, he was constantly reflecting upon and engaging with all the great incidents. Right? He was constantly asked what he thought about war. In one of my books, I always like to say this in every event on this book. I discovered this video of William Buckley Jr., who was this great intellectual from the right, and his debates, on television, where, a harmonium actually comes out. Allen Ginsberg, the great beatnik poet who became later a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, takes out a little harmonium in the middle of that debate on television, on American television, between right and left on the Vietnam War, and sings the Mahamantra. It's an epochal cultural moment in a sense. And one of my research areas, or perhaps the most core research area of mine, is global Hinduism. How did Hinduism become global? Who took it global? Who were the characters? What did they do? And so on and so forth. And it's an epochal moment. You don't expect, and you see from William Buckley Jr.'s face in that video, that he doesn't expect this. He thinks he's arguing with a beatnik poet. And there are many moments, since all of you live in England, you know that George Harrison left behind his great estate to the Krishna consciousness movement, which is now called Bhaktivedanta Manor. But that was actually an estate that George Harrison bought for himself and his family. And Srila Prabhupada not only met George Harrison there, but also he met people like Yoko Ono and, John Lennon and so on and so forth. In my book, I write about a wonderful incident where John Lennon and Yoko Ono come to Srila Prabhupada and ask him, tell us, because you're a guru, tell us what happens after death. And more importantly, can you fix it so that we are together even in the next lifetime? So these are the sort of questions, these are the sort of issues that Srila Prabhupada had to grapple with. And through it all, he tried to buy land in different parts. His movement tried to buy land in different parts of the world. And as luck would have it, the toughest was in India, in Mumbai, where they had the most problems in trying to buy land. So through this entire process, I want to conclude by saying, and there will be other opportunities, of course, to talk more about this subject. But in my opening comments, I want to conclude by pointing out one thing. All of these things are true. All that I've just said about Srila Prabhupada is true. But there's one more thing that's very true about him. Through the day, each day, he worked on spreading the Krishna consciousness movement, running this entire global organization, teaching these young men and women how to conduct themselves. Then he would go to bed at around 9 o'clock, wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and till dawn would be relentlessly alone translating and writing about the Bhagavad Gita, about the Bhagavatam, painstakingly every day of his life. So here was a man who actually barely slept for 4 hours every day. And it is because of this he was able to produce 70, 80 books in his own lifetime, written by himself. So this tremendous devotion, this ability to do extreme hard work, this commitment to a to this vast project, you might ask, where does it all come from? And the answer Srila Prabhupada would give was that his guru had told him. His guru had told him that you know English, the language English, very well. It is your task to spread the message around the world. I will conclude with this and I'll come back later. But all in all, therefore, to me as a historian, Srila Prabhupada is a remarkable figure in global Hinduism. After Vivekananda, he's the most important figure. And in fact, his impact is much bigger than Vivekananda's, because Vivekananda only started 1 or 2 centers when he went back to India, in America. Srila Prabhupada managed in only 10 years, and of course he was a much older man, remember, Vivekananda was a young man when he went to America. At a much later age, Srila Prabhupada as a septuagenarian managed to create this huge network around the world that exists even today. When the war broke out in Russia and Ukraine, I got messages from people saying, because I was tweeting something about the war, and they knew that I had written this book, and they wrote to me and sent me videos saying some of the biggest gatherings of Krishna consciousness is in Russia and Ukraine. So imagine the scope of the man and the geographical scope of the man's impact. And for all of those reasons, I think Srila Prabhupada is a figure, is a seminal figure who needs much more attention, much more work needs to be done on him. And I hope this book has started a journey. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hindal Sen Gupta ji. I now invite Professor Andrew Davies to kindly share a few words and thoughts on today's occasion.
Good afternoon, namaste everyone. It's good to be with you. Your Grace, Dr. Hindal ji, thank you so much for the privilege of being with you. And thank you for joining us. I understand there's some other stuff going on somewhere today. My invite got lost in the post, but I'm glad that you turned your invite down to be with us today. So thank you for being here. I'd like to start off by saying hearty congratulations to Hindalji for a really excellent book, which I hope you will all go and purchase. Buy copies for all your friends. It's a really excellent book, which I immensely enjoyed reading, and I think you've done a wonderful job of it. So congratulations on that. Writing a book about somebody's hero, or your personal hero, is an immense challenge because there are so many things about that person that lots of people do know. There may be some stories that aren't so commonly known. There may be some things that aren't always as immediately positive as well. And how you navigate that, how you say truthfully, this is what that person is like, without it sounding like you're trying to criticize them or debunk them, and at the same time without it sounding like you're trying to just build them up and make them into somebody they weren't. That's an incredibly difficult task, and Hindal has done a remarkable job of navigating that. There's kind of some great insight into the life of Srila Prabhupada, which kind of never over-eggs the pudding, if you like. It never pushes things too far, but also kind of highlights his significance. And he is clearly an immensely important figure in the story of global Hinduism, one of the most important figures in the last kind of 50 or 60 years for sure. So this is a story that needed telling, and it couldn't have been better told, I think. It's a beautifully written book. It's a compelling and a genuinely inspirational narrative. And one of the things that I like very much about the way the book has been executed is the beautiful way that the religious and the philosophical ideas that underpin Srila Prabhupada's kind of practices are discussed in the book clearly and plainly in ways that anybody could understand. Another thing I really like about the book is it's got recipes in it, right? If you want to make the authentic ISKCON dal, recipes in there. It's around about page 93 or something like that. So I'm certainly planning on trying that later on. And ISKCON chapatis as well. If you want the authentic recipe, that's the way to do it. So congratulations on that, and many thanks for doing it and for sharing this story with the wider world. There are many things that I've learned from this book, and I very briefly just want to mention 5 of them. There are many more, but I thought you probably wanted to go home at some stage today, so just those 5 briefly. First of all, I think I learned from Srila Prabhupada's story the power of persistence. And as Indulji kind of made very plain to us, it's not that he didn't do anything until he was 70. I really like the kind of stories of the kind of roles that he was playing in younger life. And sometimes those were kind of more backseat roles. Sometimes those were kind of supporting roles. Sometimes they weren't quite as prominent, but they were very important nevertheless. His career as a pharmacist, for instance, in the midst of all the other stuff is really quite important as well, I think. But there's a very clear narrative that really, as Indul says, his life sort of meandered in some ways. And it's only at the age of 69 that he really finds his ultimate purpose. He's doing great stuff, but it's when he finds his purpose at the age of 70 that the world is transformed and his life and work is transformed by this work. And that says so many things to me. Sometimes we just need to keep on persisting. Sometimes we just need to keep on going and keep on moving. And it might feel that our life is meandering, but I believe as a Christian, God has an eternal purpose for my life. You believe that kind of there is an eternal destiny for your lives, I'm sure. And that will be accomplished. That will be met as we persist, as we keep going. Srila Prabhupada is a remarkable example, a remarkable testimony to that. I was sharing with His Grace before that one of the things we do at the University of Birmingham Department of Theology and Religion is lots of work with emerging leaders, so especially with young women, and just helping them understand how their faith can make them more effective leaders and open doors for them to make a difference in the world. And that's really important. But I'm also inspired by this book to remember that actually it's not only young people who can make a difference in the world. His most effective decade were the years between 70 and 80. And we're all much younger than that, I can see in this room today. I mean, I'd say the average age is what, 17, 18, maybe 20. But our best years can still be ahead of us. That's a lesson I think we can learn from this book. The second lesson that I think we can learn is the power of purpose. The book starts off with the story of George Harrison and something of his insight into how he came to ISKCON and how he came to the Hare Krishna movement. And there's a beautiful story there about how both George Harrison and John Lennon said to Srila Prabhupada, look, well, kind of, it wasn't that kind of life was pointless, but that there just wasn't much worth living for at the time. And he found that purpose in ISKCON and in the Hare Krishna movement. There's another great story that Hindalji shares where some people were talking to him about various leaders and various gurus and saying to him, Srila Prabhupada, who should I follow? And Srila Prabhupada replies and says, well, just like follow somebody, right? Just stop talking about who you should follow, get out there and get following. and I love that. I think there are so many times we spend so much time just kind of empty talking about such things. And discussions are nice, discussions are good, but actually those discussions need to be put into action. And in this book we have the supreme example of somebody who throughout his life puts his thinking, puts his ideas to work because of his sense of purpose. So persistence, purpose. The power of joy. I think Sing, Dance, Pray is a great title for this book. It reflects so much of the joy of worship. And in a world where so many people who aren't believers in any religious tradition think that religion is a waste of time, those of us that do follow a particular pathway, know the joy, know the peace, know the happiness, know the fulfillment that brings us, know the strength that it provides. We've been through probably one of the most difficult few years that the world has ever gone through, haven't we? Just in case you didn't know. And I'm sure you can look back to ways that your faith and that your faith community supported you and helped you through that. Certainly I can in my context as well. I think we can learn fourthly about the power of wholeness. And I think this is something that kind of Western religious traditions very much need to learn from the Eastern traditions. There's very much a sense, I happen to be Christian, as I think I said earlier, there's very much a sense that for some people, Christianity is something you do on a Sunday morning. Christianity, you go to church for an hour or so. Sometimes in the summer you have like scones on the vicarage lawn, and that's it. That's the extent of your Christianity. One of the things I love about Indian religions is that they're centered at the very heart of daily life. You don't kind of switch them on and off. Your faith inspires you at every moment, and I believe Christianity should have the same impact on its adherents as well. Islam should on its adherents. So I love the way in which this sense of kind of not separating the world into sacred and secular, but integrating those comes very plainly across to me. He was able, even as a fairly senior official, to still continue his business. He still worked in the faith community and in the commercial world at the same time. The fifth and the final thing that I think I learned from this book is the power of caring. And my contacts with ISKCON first came along through Akshaya Patra and learning of some of the amazing things that they were doing. Round about 2 million people have been fed by Akshaya Patra. And I would imagine if you went back to the 1960s and said to Srila Prabhupada, can you imagine the ongoing impact that your organization will have had? He would have been overjoyed, I'm sure, to have thought of that immense impact. So what we have here is a great story. It's the great telling of the life of a great man. And I really enjoyed reading it and found it incredibly helpful and inspirational to me. So thank you for it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Andrew Davies. Next, I request His Grace Sri Chanchalapati Dasa to kindly share a few thoughts today with us.
I'm so happy to be here. On the one side, we have a biblical scholar and a professor, and we have a historian and a writer. Compared to their stellar qualifications, I'm a very simple devotee of Krishna. Yes, Srila Prabhupada's life is something very interesting. In fact, many people ask in ISKCON, in our institution, why did you people join the movement? You know, we left our lives, our professions and jobs and such things and became members. Invariably, we all say, because this is what has happened, we were very impressed and inspired by the message of Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, which we read in the writings of Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada presented the message of the Bhagavad Gita in a very rational, logical way, especially for the modern day educated people. But the decision to become a full-time missionary of the temple happened when we read the life story of Srila Prabhupada. Because the dedication that Srila Prabhupada showed, the sacrifices that he made, and the harmony between what he believed and what he practiced, these are some of the things which were so inspiring that we felt that here is a great person, he has got a great mission, and we must do our little bit to serve that great cause and mission for humanity. So that's the kind of an inspiration that Srila Prabhupada has brought about in the lives of thousands of devotees. Just as a matter of historical information, Srila Prabhupada, we just now heard about how from the age of 70 to 80 is when he built this institution, traveled around the world. He had 5,000 disciples, and he would call them students, my students. 5,000 students, and out of 5,000, probably not more than 100 were Indians. It was, his impact was among the Westerners, Americans, Europeans, Englishmen and women, and Australians and Africans, South Americans. So one thing that I would like to share, Srila Prabhupada encountered during his travels around the world, he met academicians, religious leaders from different religions, and he would converse with them. And Srila Prabhupada always presented that there is something that's common and central to every religious tradition in the world, and that is we must love God. We must not overindulge in the materialistic things and become attached and implicated and complicate our lives, and we should aspire to go to the kingdom of God. I think this is a common factor in every religion. Every religion directs their followers that we should become lovers of God. Now, and Srila Prabhupada said, because these religions were taught in different parts of the world, at different times of the world, in different cultures, in different languages, this central message was presented in different ways. And the practices of a religion that goes around this central purpose were different according to varying practical circumstances, climatic situations, and availability of food, and these different factors. So, Srila Prabhupada always said, let's not focus on these differences. They are peripheral to the religion. What is central to the religion is that we must all become lovers of God. And so this is the kind of an emphasis and presentation that Srila Prabhupada made. In fact, one of Srila Prabhupada's predecessor teachers, he says that if a true devotee of Krishna sees someone else worshipping God in another religion, he is overjoyed. Oh, my God is being worshipped, maybe in another way, in another method, which probably I don't understand, but it is my God who is being adored and worshipped in another tradition. So we would only be joyous to see others worshipping gods, because ultimately there is one God. Just like there is one sun. Just because the sun is shining over Britain, it doesn't become an English sun. And when sun is shining over India, it doesn't become an Indian sun. Sun is sun for everyone. In the same way, God is God for everyone. So these are the kind of universal principles that Srila Prabhupada presented. And it was Prabhupada's intention that it's actually there in the Vedic literatures. In the Vedic literatures also there are many kinds of literature, and there is one Vedic literature which is considered to be the it's called the Vedanta. Veda means knowledge, Anta means ultimate or end. And the explanation of the Vedanta is another book called the Srimad Bhagavatam. And in the Srimad Bhagavatam there is a discussion about which is the best religion. And you may expect that the Bhagavatam will say the Hindu religion is the best religion. It doesn't say that. It says that religion which enables you to develop unalloyed, uninterrupted, unmotivated love of God, that is the best religion. So it is the teaching of the love of God, and that love of God should be unmotivated. Meaning, not that I will do this to God so that the God will give me so many more things to me. That's a very material kind of a religious idea. And so it is, I want to love God because for all the things that God has done to us. The God has given us, every few hours we need to eat something and drink something, isn't it? And all of this food is a gift of God. Every moment we have to breathe air, and all of this is available free of cost. We don't pay an oxygen bill every month. We pay a mobile bill, we pay an electricity bill, we pay gas bills, we pay so many things. But air, sunshine, earth, water, even the water bill you pay is actually for the department which brought the water from the reservoir to your home. For the water which was available in the reservoir, you are not paying anybody. That's given by God free of cost. Because actually, there is only one person who gives to us free. Everybody else in this world, they asks you to pay for it. You go and stay in a hotel for 3 days, at the end of 3 days, they'll give you a bill. You go to a restaurant and eat somewhere, they'll give you a bill. There's only one person who doesn't give a bill to us. And that is our parents, isn't it? They take care of us, they feed us, and they take care of us so much all through our lives. And at some point they don't come and say, my dear son, my dear daughter, this is the bill, I have been taking care of you for so long, please pay up the bill. They never say. It's only the father and the mother who gives to the children free of cost out of love. It's the same way God gives to all of us out of His love for us. And God only wants us to acknowledge this and reciprocate this. In fact, Srila Prabhupada explains, there are religion is encouraging and trying to encourage people so that they turn towards God. Otherwise, we have a tendency to turn away from God, be independent of God, be unmindful of God. In the Shastra, it is called Krishna Bahirmukha. So, we have to be Krishna Antarmukha. We have to turn towards God, not turn away from God. So, and all religions are teaching us. And Srila Prabhupada pointed out, yes, in religions there is sometimes an inducement that you do this to God and God will bless you. But that's a religion, that's a part of the, you're acknowledging God, you're recognizing God as a provider. It is good. But something higher than that is pure Shuddha Bhakti, or pure devotion, or pure love of God, where you want to serve God and you want to offer your prayers to God and not ask anything in return. And Prabhupada said, when the child is young, the child will ask the father and mother, Papa, give me this, Mama, give me this, and the parents are giving. And when the same child grows up, and the child is expected, out of his maturity and understanding, must go back to father and mother and say, my dear father, my dear mother, you have done so much to me. What can I do for you? How can I serve you? So this asking for some material benefits is also religion, but higher form of religion is to ask God, how can I please you and how can I serve you? So, bhakti, Shuddha bhakti, is about anyabhilashita shunyam jnana karmadya navrutam. Anya abhilasha shunyam. And only want to anukulyena Krishna anushilanam. Simply wanting to please Krishna because God has already provided us so many things. That's a more mature prayer. And this is what Bhagavatam teaches. This is what Bhagavad Gita teaches. And so, Srila Prabhupada wanted to present these ideas about God and how we all should become lover of God. And by developing love of God, we naturally develop love for all of the creation of God. Not that we will love God and we will hate mankind. That's not real love of God. Srila Prabhupada gave an example. A woman, when she is at a certain age, she gets married to a husband, to a man, and he becomes her husband. She makes one connection with that man as a husband. Because of that one connection, immediately the husband's father and mother become related to her as her in-laws. The husband's brother becomes related to her as a brother-in-law. The sister will get related. Everyone connected to the husband becomes related to her because she established one connection with the husband. In the same way, when we make our one connection with God, because God is connected to everyone, we will also become connected to all of the human beings, not just human beings, all living entities in the world, because God is the Father of all living entities. So this is the kind of a devotion, love of God, and love and respect for all of creation of God. These are some of the messages that Srila Prabhupada presented, and he was asked by his guru, his mentor, his spiritual master, to share this knowledge with the rest of the world and to bring amity, to bring unity among all human beings. We can find innumerable reasons to say that we are different, but we should find one strong reason to say that we are all one. And that one common factor is that we are all children of the same God, and we must learn to love that God. So Srila Prabhupada, as Hindol mentioned, he was so strongly inspired by this idea that we should make everyone happy and united in this world, because otherwise there are too many divisive forces in this world. How to bring all of us together? He was so inspired and dedicated to this, and he worked very diligently even at his advanced age. Like Hindol pointed out, he had this message, he wanted to give this message. He traveled around the world 14 times at that advanced age, and his first maiden journey from India to America was not in a flight, but in a cargo ship, traveling for 35 days. And so these are the kinds of hardships that Srila Prabhupada underwent. And like Hindol mentioned, while his young disciples from all over the world, they were helping him to build this, and by the time they all would go to sleep in the night, he would rise to begin writing his books. And that is how he wrote 70 books from the age of 70 to 81 when he passed away. So these are some of the incredible achievements of Srila Prabhupada, and he was driven by, as Professor Andrew pointed out, his purpose, his persistence, and that love and compassion for humanity. These are some of the things that Srila Prabhupada exhibited, and I think all of us have something to learn from the life of Srila Prabhupada. And we thank Hindol for making this accessible and available through this book. And we are very thankful to Professor Andrew Davies to be with us and share his insights after reading the book. And we are so happy to have all of you here in this temple. Namaste.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Dr. Hindol, would you now like to take the conversation forward?
We can also open
The floor to questions? Yeah, sure. All right.
we can take the conversation forward and take some questions.
Great. All right. I think you all heard that. In case you missed it, what Hindolji was requesting is that we can have a few questions and through the questions take the conversation forward. Got you. Are there any questions from the audience? Yes, please tell us.
Jai Srila Prabhupada, Hare Krishna Prabhuji. It's so good and I'm so fortunate to see you here and get association. And my question to Mr. Hindol is, like, what motivated you to write about Prabhupada?
I must begin with on a funny note. You shouldn't have been scared at all about me coming from Bengal and writing a book about Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada also came from Bengal. You see, so, and from Calcutta, the city that I come from. No, but jokes apart, a lot of people like you who have read Being Hindu also read this book, also had read my book on Vivekananda and so on and so forth. I always say, as I said here before, I'm very interested in global Hinduism. On how Hinduism spread around the world, who were the seminal figures who took Hinduism around the world. And all these dots connect somewhere, right? Please remember, many of the people who did seminal work like Srila Prabhupada and taking Hinduism around the world began their journey often in America. Now you would ask why? Well, that of course was because America was the most influential country of that time. However, with Srila Prabhupada's case, he coming from Bengal and having seen colonial Bengal, he always thought of London as the most important city in the world, and he was always really focused on spreading the word of Sri Krishna in the UK and in London. And of course his devotees, yesterday His Grace was telling us about the early devotees of ISKCON who came to London and what hardships they went through in their early period. But they managed to reach the Beatles, they managed to reach George Harrison and create this massive movement, right? So I think all of this, many Indians also don't know this history, right? Many Indians, even in Calcutta, many people would not be able to show you the area where Srila Prabhupada lived in a jiffy, right? Of course, some people know Mayapur, but there are many other historical places that people are not aware of. And this is true in general. Indians often don't know much about their own history. But certainly I feel in theological history, in the history of religion, Indians, while they might know a lot about the devotional aspect, often don't know about the historical aspect. What happens because of that is, like has happened with the Krishna consciousness movement, the movement is known, but the efforts of the founder is often not known. Right? And it's only when, as you were talking, I was looking at, some of the comments from the book, as Francis Clooney of Harvard wrote in his comments on this book, you can only understand the Krishna consciousness movement in its totality if you understand its founder and the founder's life and what he did and what his commitments were, what his struggles were, what his, passionate beliefs were, right? I think it's very important for us to also develop this historical understanding of who these people were, what their motivations were, what drove them to do the things that they did, and why they became successful. I think it's very important. And that's, this book about Srila Prabhupada is one more step of mine in that journey. And I hope to do much more in this regard. But, it's an initial step to help people understand and connect the dots that these people didn't exist in isolation. They were very much part of a wider world. They were very much part of many struggles. They overcame many struggles to finally do what they actually could do.
Are there any plans to translate this to Bengal?
Bengali we don't know yet, but as His Grace knows, Hindi and Marathi are already on the cards. Hindi and Marathi are coming. First Hindi will come and then Marathi. Bengali we don't know yet. We are still in conversation.
Thank you so much for your question. Is there another one? Yes, please.
Thank you very much for today, panel. Just wondering, given the interdisciplinarity of research, particularly with theology and religion and so on, how did you arrive at the final narrative? So I'm interested to know, once you had the archives and once you were delving into the narrative and the discipline behind it, of course, how did you arrive at the final boundaries of what you were doing, and how did you include or completely disregard aspects of the journey that was taken, please? I'm just interested in the research process that you adopted.
You know, I'm so glad that this Professor Andrew Davies is also here, so he will, back this. One of my Oxford professors used to say that research is not only knowing where to start, but also knowing where to stop. If you don't know where to stop, then it's endless. You can go on and on to eternity, and at the end of it, you will never have a book. It's a bit like dissertation writing. When we used to write our dissertations, knowing where to stop was very important. Otherwise, you would never meet the deadline. So that's very important. And, I had written several books before this, so there is a craft that develops, and, along the way, perhaps. So that's important. But for me, the most important thing, and many people, including Professor Davies also mentioned this today, for me, a very important task of this book was to give a very holistic, contextual picture of Srila Prabhupada. And that's why, for instance, the gentleman mentioned there was a lot of emphasis on his early life. What did he do before he became Srila Prabhupada? Often with spiritual figures, sometimes the way they are written about, as if they suddenly sprung up from somewhere, or suddenly descended from heaven and started working. But that's of course never true, right? There's always a history, there's a background, there's a struggle, there are many things that they engage with. And knowing of all of these things, I think, gives us a deeper, richer understanding of where they come from and their journey. So I think that's important. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. One of the things you said that Srila Prabhupada was at a time where you had Subhash Chandra Bose, you had Gandhiji. What were his views on non-violence, and how did he navigate that?
No, so I think those views, they're mentioned in the book, and you can go, I think there's one video still available of somebody asking Srila Prabhupada this. So Srila Prabhupada, I think, had a very clear idea that non-violence, the concept of non-violence, is obviously a qualified what do you mean by non-violence? Non-violence towards whom, right? And he obviously always felt that, in certain circumstances, in the Bhagavad Gita, finally, Krishna asked Arjuna to fight, right? So therefore, while non-violence, we must practice non-violence towards all living things and so on and so forth. But in the dharmic framework, there could be certain contexts in which it becomes your duty to fight back. And sometimes it could be fighting back against your own vile or your own lesser sort of, emotions and so on and so forth. It doesn't always have to be an external thing, but sometimes it's an internal thing. But fighting is necessary in those things, because unless you subdue, what we in the dharmic universe would call asuric, or the lesser sort of emotions or ideas in society, unless we push back against that, then the dharmic ideal cannot be maintained. It's impossible. It's the same way that we cannot be devotional without working to cleanse ourselves from our base instincts, right? If you don't fight against those base instincts, you will be trapped in the material world forever. So there, if you say, well, I don't want to cleanse this, then it won't really work. So I think he was very clear about that.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. All obeisance to Srila Prabhupada. I'm actually from London, and Mr. Manish Bhai would insisted me to try to circulate and try to bring people down here. After all, this, what Mr. Hindal has produced, this book, I'm very much happy. Actually, you see, we are not understood Prabhupada, to be honest with you. We Hindus, we claim ourselves as a Hindu, but do we know exactly what is our duty. And certain thing is that I feel that when I've read some of the points in our Bhagavad Gita, where it emphasizes on our soul, which Prabhupada also mentioned that. So we actually see as a main thing, where I don't know, I haven't read the book yet, but if it was emphasized on the soul, then it becomes everybody, all the living entities. So when Prabhupada said to all this, our foreigners, especially the foreigners, our Hindus were basically, they were knowing that, oh, I know, it's my religion, it's my Hindu. But Prabhupada said that understand yourself who is within you. So therefore, if these Europeans and English and everybody understood that, oh, there is Paramatma, that God is with me. So how can I behave with that Paramatma in a different way? So it will make him understand, oh, I should not hate him. I should not do anything to him. Because Paramatma is there. He is noting down everything. We always say that God is noting down each and every action, what you take. So therefore, that action, what you take, He is noting it down. He may say, where, what is it? But it happens to you. That reaction is going to come. So therefore, I wanted to know about the soul, if you have mentioned anything on this book. I haven't read it, but I'm definitely going to read it. Thank you very much.
I'll wait for you to read it. I'll wait for you to read it.
I have only one single question. What motivated you to keep this type of singing, dance, and practice? Because from what the conversation I heard, you're not talking about the singing, the dancing, or the praying yet. It's more about his lifestyle. But what motivated you to this type?
If you go to any ISKCON gathering, or if you go to any Krishna consciousness gathering, you will see a lot of monks singing, dancing, and praying. For instance, if you go to Soho, where the famous temple is there, and that Govinda restaurant is there, very good vegetarian food, you will often see monks singing and dancing. This has a context. See, a lot of people don't realize that when you see these monks dancing on the streets and you see Prabhupada, this is not something that Prabhupada, and Prabhupada himself would say this, it's not something he invented. This is the long tradition, and if you read the book, that began with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu created these bands of, devotees, so to speak, singing and dancing through the streets. But why was he doing it? And then, we have to go to the story of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, anybody who takes the name of the Lord is my brother. Is me, in fact, and deserves the love of God. Srila Prabhupada took that even further and said, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, let the name of the Lord be mentioned in every village and town around the world. So many people thought around the world meant only India. Srila Prabhupada said, no, around the world means around the world. So I'll take it around the world. Right? So that tradition, in my book I mentioned yesterday, we were talking about this, I found references in Bengali newspapers. Srila Prabhupada also lived through the plague in Calcutta. There were Vaishnavite groups to help people, and this is so important because we've all lived through the COVID period, to help people understand that, okay, now the cleansing has happened, you are safe now, you can come out of your house. Vaishnavite groups in the tradition of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would go singing and dancing after the plague got ended through the streets of Calcutta, showcasing that, look, we are taking the risk, it's fine now, you can come out of your house. Right? So putting all of this together, sing, dance and pray seemed like an interesting, title.
On that note, I would like to especially thank Professor Andrew Davies. You have very thoughtfully provided deeper context to the life and relevance of Srila Prabhupada. Thank you for your contribution and sharing. Thank you, Dr. Hindal Sengupta ji, for shining light upon so many inspiring details of Srila Prabhupada's life. I now humbly request His Grace Chanchalapati Das ji to present the temple honors to Professor Andrew Davies. These are the temple honors all the way from ISKCON Bangalore Temple. also request His Grace Chanchalapati Das Ji to please present the book Sing, Dance and Pray to our special guest today, Srimati Kanika Mehta, the Vice Councillor, Indian High Commission of Birmingham, at Birmingham. I also request His Grace to kindly present a copy of the book to the Pandit Ji here at Shree Geeta Bhawan. Finally, I would like to thank Shri Vipul Mistry ji for arranging this event at Shree Geeta Bhawan today. Shri Gautam ji and Shri Minesh ji, thank you so much for all your proactive support. I thank all the guests who have gathered here today to reflect on the life of Srila Prabhupada. And thank you too to the Geeta Bhavan staff and team and volunteers and all the devotees who've gathered here to make this particular program a meditative one. Have a wonderful afternoon. Hare Krishna.